Hi, I'm Marley and I'm joined today by Becca, and we're going to be having an open and honest discussion about the fourth trimester. It's not spoken about very often, so we're going to talk about what it means for mums. So Becca, what are your thoughts on the fourth trimester and why do you think it isn't spoken about as often as it should be?
Well, fourth trimester, for anyone who hasn't heard about it, it's the 3 months when you first become a mum. It's those 3 months with your new baby. Lots of people consider it to be like an extension of your pregnancy. Do you know what I mean? It's like this episode of time where you are adjusting to your new role in life and getting to know your baby and just working it all out. And it isn't really spoken enough about. Lots of people have never even heard of it. And you know, I would love to change that. And I know that companies like Lansinoh want to open up the conversation to help women feel more prepared for what's ahead, because it can be really, really difficult, can't it?
Yeah, I mean, historically, when you think about having a baby, we tend to learn, as a midwife, I would teach a lot about pregnancy and birth and what to expect. But so many mums will come back afterwards and say, I didn't know this was going to happen. I wasn't told that, I'd have postpartum bleeding for however many weeks, or that, my breast would feel this way, or that I would emotionally feel this way. So it's so important to teach that to people antenatally.
Yeah, exactly. I think
otherwise it's a shock, isn't it?
Yeah,
otherwise.
Right. I think traditionally antenatal classes have sort of just dealt with the common topics of pregnancy and giving birth and pain relief options and things like that. And then that's kind of where it stops. And sometimes they touch on breastfeeding and that's it. And then I think same with sort of books, the books that have been out there for 10, 20, 30 years that people have been reading. It prepares you, but only to a certain extent. And then I think when it actually happens and you're there in that situation with your new baby, perhaps you're having difficulties breastfeeding, perhaps you're in pain, like bleeding you mentioned, that comes as a shock. It can all feel like a huge shock. And on top of that, you're trying to learn how to be a mum for the first time. So
it's difficult. And when we talk about the words like postnatal and postpartum, which actually mean the same thing, but it's more geared towards the mum, and what she's going through at that time. But when we use the term fourth trimester, we're kind of encompassing the changes that mum goes through and the baby as well. So what to expect, so that you're not in as much shock. So when we're talking about like physical changes that mums go through when they've had a baby, I know Lansinoh did some research that showed that 75% of mums were not prepared for physical pain and changes that they go through afterwards. And even things like, I don't know if you experience this, because I know you have children as well, but the pains after birth, and not everyone gets them.
No.
When I had my first baby, I didn't have any kind of cramping or after pains. By the time I got to my fifth baby, it actually felt like I was back in labour again, And the amount of mums that come to me as a midwife and say, oh my gosh, what's going on? Am I in labour? Is there a twin in there? Am I having another baby? Because they weren't told about it. And that's something that I talk a lot about, to expectant parents, face to face or on Instagram, or, just in general, because they need to know these things.
Yeah, you do. You need to know. It's like, I always say, if you were going to run a marathon, you'd do the research, right? You would speak to people who had done it before you, and you would, know that you're going to get blisters, and you know that you weren't going to be able to walk for the next week after your marathon. And I think, people should have a similar approach to childbirth, to becoming a parent, to the fourth trimester. They should do their research, and they should speak to friends and read good books and get their antenatal education from trusted sources. And you need an honest kind of view of what's ahead, so that it doesn't come as a shock, because not having realistic expectations about this fourth trimester, I think, can have consequences for your mental health as well, because feeling unprepared and feeling shocked in such a nerve-wracking time anyway can be really, really, really tricky, I think.
It can. And also having unrealistic expectations of how you think a baby should behave as well, because think about it, you've just gone through an incredible time. You've just given birth, so your body has gone through it, physically and emotionally as well. And then you've got this baby to look after. And if you're not prepared on how a baby usually behaves and acts, which most normal, healthy newborn babies behave in a similar manner, in terms of like feeding regularly, wanting to be held all the time. That is normal infant behaviour. But if you're not aware of that, it can be a bit of a shock when your baby is up. The amount of times I've been to visit mums and dads as new parents, and they say to me, but the baby's crying all night. The baby's crying and feeding all night long, and then sleeps in the day. And I think to myself, gosh, no one told this. Yeah. No one told this couple.
It was such a shock for me. It was such a shock for me. I had
a body clock.
Yeah. But you see the pictures of the mum gazing lovingly into her baby's eyes, and you're thinking, that's what motherhood is going to be like for me. And in reality, it's very different. And in our antenatal classes, we're always trying to say to women, it's not like the black and white pictures you've seen. It's not like these little snapshots you see on social media. It's difficult. It's really hard. And you need to be prepared. You need support. You need to have almost like a plan of action, and you need to know where to turn to get help and advice. And you might have a baby that cries all night and sleeps all day, and it won't happen forever. It won't be like that forever. It's a phase. And I think just knowing that it's going to be hard is sort of half the battle won, because then you know things are going to get better.
But it's hard, isn't it, being in that state, being right in the thick of it, when you're tired, you're exhausted, you're aching, boobs are leaking, or you're engorged or whatever. And
the fluids no one told me about, or just feeling so damp and
everywhere.
Soggy and just coming out here and here, sweating, the night sweats. No one told me about the night sweats. And I had no idea that the bleeding would go on for up to 6 weeks.
For weeks, sometimes even longer for some people, and it can come as a bit of a shock. And when obviously now we're not pregnant, we haven't got small babies anymore, so we can kind of look back in hindsight. But when you're in that position and someone says to you, "It's not going to last forever," you're thinking, yes, but at the moment, it feels like forever. It feels like it's just going on and on. The exhaustion, the emotions, it can really, really, really have a massive impact. And we compare ourselves to other people too much. You might look at somebody and, I fell in love with my baby straight away.
Yes, my sister had a baby the same week as me, and it was really difficult comparing my situation with hers, because our babies were quite different. Hers just slept and fed and slept and fed, and she would lay her baby down in the Moses basket and walk away, and her baby would self-settle. And mine was just up crying all night. And it's very difficult when you're comparing yourself to another mum, let alone another mum you don't even know. On social media, you see all these women who look like they've, got it nailed, and
just walked out of a beauty salon.
Exactly.
And they've got these newborn babies.
I know, and I'm sitting at home with stuff coming out of every orifice.
That's the reality.
Not loving it. And I think it's so important to be honest with the new mums coming behind us, and to help prepare them.
So lots of people that I've spoken to and that I've seen writing on social media and in other groups talk about that period after having a baby in quite a negative manner. Some people will have great experiences, and great for them. But a lot of mums that I've come across will reference the fourth trimester, that 3-month period, as being lonely, as just feeling isolated, apprehensive, feeling like they're in pain as well.
It can be such a challenging time.
And what do we need to do to change that? How can we kind of move forward? I know that Lansinoh did another survey, and 83% of mums feel that women should be preparing themselves for the fourth trimester, for that postnatal period. But do you think there's anything else that we can do, or is it all about preparation.
Yeah, I think
Is that key?
Like we keep saying, it's about having realistic expectations and about anticipating that it's going to be tough and anticipating that it's going to be challenging. I think is just so helpful, just to know that it's going to be hard and not to imagine that you're necessarily going to take to it overnight and be loving every minute. I think that's a thing that lots of new mums find very difficult, being told enjoy every moment. You're like, seriously?
Yeah.
Or all, you know, the nappies and the sleepless nights and the boobs and the, you know.
You can't possibly enjoy every second of it.
No, we're not going to enjoy every moment of everyday life. And it will be difficult, it will be challenging, but you will get through it, and there will be amazing moments as well. I think it's important to just sort of remember it in context of the it's a long journey, it's not a sprint, is it? And you know, you're going to be a mum for life, and it's, although those first few months can be really difficult, you know, things will get better, and there's help for you. There is help for you, whether it's from your GP or going back to your midwife, or you know, reading or joining an Instagram community where you feel like you're not alone, and you know, finding kindred spirits, because it is so lonely and isolating. And
it is.
I often say to women, it makes sense if you think about it. Before you have a baby, maybe you've got a busy social life, professional life, and you can be spontaneous and you do what you want, and then suddenly, boom, you've got a baby, and you have to ask permission from someone to go to the loo. You have to get someone else to hold the baby to go to the loo, and things just change overnight. And it's very hard to explain that to someone who hasn't been through it.
Yeah.
And quite often you don't discover it, you know, until you're in the moment and struggling. And just knowing that other people are going through the same thing too, I think is really helpful.
Yeah, very, very helpful. I absolutely agree. Joining groups and communities where people are going through something similar, and we need to stop putting pressure on ourselves. We need to stop putting pressure on themselves in terms of making comparisons. Well, so-and-so's baby went through the night at, you know, 2 days old, and which never happens, by the way. You know, and you know, why is my baby still waking up in the night all these months or years later even? So stop with the comparisons and understand that actually some of these negative feelings that are associated with the fourth trimester are actually normal.
Yeah. Exactly. You know? Like the baby blues. Lots of people don't know about the baby blues. They don't know that on day 3, 4 or 5, they're just going to burst into tears and think, can I give this baby back? Is it too late?
Oh my gosh.
What have I done? But that's normal.
Yeah.
And in fact, if you don't have that, that's more strange if you don't go through that.
And then the guilt that comes with it as well. You know, I remember it clearly. And then thinking, oh my gosh, but I should be so grateful.
Yes.
You know, I've got this healthy baby, and not everyone is as fortunate as I've been. So I need to stop, you know, I need to sort myself out.
Yeah.
And actually, it's normal to feel like that. It is normal to feel like that. And I will always say that, you know, if you are feeling low or down, or, you know, feel that sense of guilt or hopelessness, if it's just for a day or two and, you know, and it passes, that's normal. But if it does go on, if it is persistent, then you might want to reach out to somebody to get some support, because then we have to start thinking about other things like postnatal depression, which is treatable if it's picked up, you know, but it's about knowing where to go, having that support, and knowing what to look out for as well.
And
it's about getting that balance, isn't it? Yeah,
and also feeling confident in looking for that support, in sort of not being embarrassed to go to your GP or back to your midwife, or, you know, the same goes with sort of other postnatal issues. If you have any issues with healing or with breastfeeding or anything physical or mental, just not being worried about going and putting your hand up and saying, you know, I'm not having a good time, this something doesn't feel right. I think that's really important.
Yeah.
Knowing that your GP or your midwife or whoever your healthcare provider is, just knowing they're there for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So Becca, if you could give one tip to a new mum for preparing for that fourth trimester, what would you say?
I would say that it's really important to have honest conversations with people who've been through it. And I'm not talking about scaring yourself with, you know, horrific birth stories or anything like that, but I'm just talking about just honest, realistic chats with friends or family who've been through it, or, you know, reading a good book, like yours or mine, reading a good book or doing a good course that is not full of sort of positivity and butterflies and flowers and unrealistic portraits of motherhood, but something that's just going to tell you how it really is, something that doesn't sugarcoat but doesn't scaremonger either, just honest, reliable and expert advice. I think is good to seek that out.
Absolutely. I would say I would give 2 tips. One would be in terms of things like a practical tip, so like getting some food prepared perhaps before you have your baby, if you can. I know people say it's a bit of a cliche, something, oh, prepare yourself some meals before you have your baby. But actually, it can really be beneficial because you're going to be tired and exhausted physically and mentally, but also your partner's going to need to be there to help support you. They're probably going to be tired as well. So no one's really going to want to cook. So there's that. And also get your partner involved. Get the partners involved in whatever they can be involved
nappies.
In.
All the nappies.
Yeah, nappies, bathing, making sure that you're fed because they can't, if you're breastfeeding, they can't breastfeed the baby, but they can make sure you're fed.
They can wind it afterwards.
Exactly. So get them involved. And also for any partners that are watching, I would always say, keep an eye on your partner's mental health, keep an eye on their mental health. And if there's anything that's doesn't quite seem right, then to reach out to a healthcare provider or a friend or somebody.
Yeah, I think that's great advice.
Yeah.